Jacob Rees-Mogg, welcome back to Chopper's Brexit podcast. Is Brexit dead?
Well, I think you asked the right question, and it's why I have very reluctantly changed my mind to back Mrs May's deal, because I think it is Mrs May's deal or Brexit is so long delayed that it may never happen.
And it's with caveats, of course, with the, you only supporting it if the DUP come round, and they're not coming round, are they?
Well, we'll have to see what happens and if a vote is brought forward and whether something can be done to assuage their concerns. So we'll have to wait and see.
When you were last on our podcast, you quoted, I think it was the Royal Navy marching tune, Steady Boys Steady, as part of the lyric. I mean, everyone thought that was okay. You were sort of hold firm for a no deal, and then you're backing a deal which you think is not really Brexit.
It is the position that the government could have insisted we left tomorrow, today, as people are listening, at 11 o'clock in the evening. That was in the power of the government, it was our law, and the government gave in. And the government decided it would not pursue our departure date, in spite of the Prime Minister promising it over 100 times. Now, I can't override the government. So there comes a point where what you wish to happen and what is happening are not the same. And you have to deal with the reality as it is, not as you wish it to be.
Have you damaged your personal credibility by backing the deal?
Well, I'm not interested in my personal credibility. That's a thought for other people to concern themselves with. I'm concerned about leaving the European Union. That's my whole political interest at the moment, and has been since the referendum started. We must leave the European Union, and if people think I'm a deck chair, into each life a little rain must fall.
A deck chair on the Titanic, you mean?
No, a deck chair that's folded up.
Oh, I see. You're folded. Oh, you're folded. Have you
that's
folded?
Right. That's right. It's that.
Sorry, I'm folding of my mind into a deck chair.
No, nothing to do with shipping.
No. I asked you about that because Steve Baker, the vice chairman of the European Research Group, and you're of course the chairman, he said last night that well, people like you have been played as a fool and a coward, and he now wants to bulldoze Parliament. Well, let's ignore the last bit of that. But have you been played here? I mean. And how are you going to mend fences with colleagues like Steve, a friend of yours too?
Well, Steve and I remain friends, and we work very closely together. Steve is understandably, as I am, very fed up with how this system has worked out, and that we have been promised things that have not been delivered upon very consistently. There are two interpretations of this. One is that Downing Street has had a fiendishly clever strategy designed in the end to get Mrs May's plan through.
And out of a job.
The other is that there has not been a fiendishly clever strategy, but a series of accidents that have led us to this state. I may be charitable or I may be naive, but I think it's the latter, that it's a series of errors that have got us to where we are, rather than a fiendishly designed strategy.
You've started tweeting like Yoko Ono, haven't you?
I don't know how you come to that conclusion.
Well, you tweeted the other day, half a loaf of bread is better than no bread, which is the kind of thing, a sort of gnomic statement which Yoko Ono might do about world peace.
I don't think it's a gnomic statement at all. It's a very
What do you mean by half a loaf of bread? And then
half a loaf is better than no bread. This is a very ancient expression.
Is it? Is it biblical?
No, I don't think it's biblical, no, but it's one of considerable antiquity. It's a very obvious point. If you go into a shop and they've got half a loaf, you're better with the half loaf than you are if they've got no bread. I don't think this is gnomic. I think this is amazingly clear.
And if they and you make a sandwich.
Mrs May's deal is half a loaf.
Yes.
But not leaving is no bread.
Yes.
So I'm backing Mrs May's deal.
So you've got half a loaf now. Can you make it bigger with sandwich filling? I mean, can it be improved over the next few years with a good political declaration if it gets through?
I think the future relationship becomes a matter of politics rather than of law. I noticed that Dominic Cummings has said that he doesn't think the backstop is permanent. I think if you have weak leadership, if you have weak government, and you have government that's determined to stay in the EU, then the backstop becomes permanent. If you have strong leadership, determined leadership, that is willing to use the levers at its control, then the backstop ends, and that's what we need.
But with Theresa May, she had levers, and then she got rid of them all.
That is one way of looking at it. But I think that's right. I mean, if you look at the negotiating strategy, it started off on the wrong foot. It allowed the EU to set the timing of the
and the sequential arrangement of the deal.
Sequential arranging, and it allowed the EU to draw up the text. Why weren't we drawing up the text? And also, we flogged over to Brussels all the time. Why didn't they come here to talk to us?
As we sit today, the DUP are against the deal, as going on last night's statement and comments from Arlene Foster. If there's a vote tomorrow or early next week, you would vote against the deal because the DUP don't back it yet.
Well,
is that right?
Let's wait and see, because A vote hasn't yet been brought forward. The Speaker is indicating a vote.
Quite clearly, your support is contingent on DUP support too.
I want the DUP to support this deal,
and I am
supporting the DUP.
And it won't. But you won't move forward until the DUP will move first.
As it happens, I think the meaningful vote won't come forward without the DUP's support. So I doubt I will ever have to make this choice. But the DUP I view as guardians of the Union, and I think the Union is more important than the European Union.
Because people do forget that the U in DUP stands for Unionist Party, and that is part of their DNA. And no amount of money or extra hospitals or roads will get if they mess this up, they just lose all reason to exist in Northern Ireland. That's the problem they have. Existential issue for them, isn't it?
The Union is everything for them.
And for some Tories equally, the Brexit issue is also existential for the party, isn't it?
Well, I think the United Kingdom is more important to most Tories even than the European Union. Bear in mind, our name historically is the Conservative and Unionist Party.
You find yourself now on the side of number 10, don't you, Nis? Will you be love bombing, using your legendary charming skills on the DUP and other Brexiteer MPs who haven't come over yet? Now and over the next few days.
Look, I think you exaggerate my influence. I don't think anyone's particularly listening to me.
You're chairman of the ERG.
I'm chairman of the ERG, but I'm chairman of a collegiate body rather than somebody who is able to persuade people
with a whipping operation. With a whipping operation.
No, whipping operation overstates it.
But would you be using? Will you talk to number 10 and coordinating with them? I mean, you can bring people over.
I don't know that I have that much influence, to be perfectly honest. I think that it's in the hands of number 10. As to what they can offer to the DUP that will assuage their genuine concerns.
Yeah. When do you think the next MV3, the next vote will be, if it's not tomorrow, which had been the plan?
Well, the Speaker's statement yesterday was absolutely fascinating because in
which he said that the government can't get around it with a paving motion and it must be different.
But he'd clearly forgotten what was in the business motion that had been passed by the House just moments before he made this statement, because that motion had said that the usual convention that the same motion may not be put twice is suspended for the purposes of the motions put yesterday. So it's very odd that the Speaker accepted this motion that was passed yesterday and then said such a motion is invalid. It can't be valid on the morning of Wednesday and invalid for the morning of Thursday.
But that business motion relates to indicative votes, doesn't it, and repeated votes on that issue.
So it said, but his ruling was that it would be disorderly to put down a motion overruling the practice of the House of not considering the same issue.
You think it allows...
But he had just allowed such a motion earlier that day.
By his own words, that should mean that MV3, the third amendment vote, should be able to go ahead without any changes.
We should certainly allow a paving motion for it. That's the issue now. It's not that the precedent on refusing repeated motions is a very good one, a very ancient one. The problem is the erratic nature of with which precedents are being applied
by the Speaker.
By Mr. Speaker.
Are we seeing in Technicolor absolute bias from that Speaker against Brexit right now?
No, I think bias is the wrong word. I think Mr. Speaker would view it as being a champion of the House of Commons against the executive. And
is he a fair referee? I mean, he's not, is he?
Well, I don't know much about referees. I'm more a cricketer than a footballer, so I know more about umpires. There's no DRS as far as Mr. Speaker's concerned, but I think he does view himself as champion of the House of Commons.
Yeah.
And I've therefore supported a great deal of what he's done.
Everyone does.
I think the problem we've got to now is that at some point there will be a government with a comfortable majority, and the advances that he has made will be lost, because a new government with a majority will rewrite standing orders in such a way that the Speaker cannot blow his nose without the permission of a government minister. The role of Speaker will be hollowed out once there is a government that has a majority, because the country can't be governed in this way. We saw that yesterday. It was chaotic. It made the House of Commons
he's overplayed his hand.
He has overplayed his hand, and yesterday made the House of Commons not look as if it were in control, but if it were a foolish debating society voting down everything that was put before it. Oliver Letwin, Hilary Benn...
Is he a menace, Letwin?
So Oliver's a great man. But what he did yesterday lacks accountability. He can't be called to the dispatch box to answer for what he did, nor can Hilary Benn. The government can be held to account. Random MPs cannot be. And therefore this upsetting of the Constitution is quite wrong and damaging. it's a misunderstanding of the relationship between the executive and the legislature. And the truth is, in my view, that if people feel in the way Sir Oliver does, they should put a vote of confidence down in the government and not back the government in that, and have a new government that can command the competence of the House.
Because there's simply no way the government can put in place motions in Parliament that there's not even in their manifesto, which is against their manifesto. I mean, it's crazy, right?
It constitutionally doesn't work. It means we don't have the government of this country that people voted for. It overrides democracy to put it into hands of a few MPs who have no broader mandate than their own constituency. There's no Letwin party, there's no Ben party.
I've got to ask you about leadership, Jacob Rees-Mogg. Will you be Prime Minister?
Will I be Prime Minister? No, I will not be Prime Minister.
Just you and me talking, no one's listening.
No, but I'm sorry your 100th podcast has so few people paying attention. I think thousands, millions.
You don't want to be PM
listening.
then? People talk about you as a PM.
They're very kind. I'm not going to be a candidate that I wouldn't have any support amongst MPs. I might have some support amongst the party in the country.
Last night when I asked you, you wouldn't comment. It was the wrong night. Theresa May just said she's going to resign.
Right.
It's the next morning now. You're free to talk now.
I think that's a very fair point. I felt yesterday that when a Prime Minister goes, a certain amount of space, even with 24-hour news, should be allowed to consider...
and tributes and think about her legacy and the rest of it.
That's right.
It's the next morning now.
The next morning, I think people are entitled to discuss leadership. But
and who will you be supporting? Boris Johnson?
Well, let's add two riders to this at the moment. The Prime Minister's statement was conditional on the deal getting through.
Correct.
And at the moment, it looks as if that condition may not be met. So there is currently no formal vacancy. And the starting gun hasn't been fired by the chairman of the 1922 Committee.
Correct.
So we're not yet into the leadership.
With those riders out of the way.
With those riders in place. I'll say what I've said before about Boris. I think he is a formidably able political figure, somebody who was able to win elections in London.
And he moves the country, he moves
basically people. A Labour city. So he's got great political appeal. And I think many MPs will think his name on their election leaflets would be helpful because he has this broad popular appeal. So I think Boris is a formidably able candidate.
And of the ones you can see, he's the one you would support if there were an election.
There isn't yet an election, so let's come to that. Let's do your 110th podcast
or
and
200th.
or 200th, and see if we've got a little bit more clarity.
Would colleagues of yours be foolish not to let him get onto the final two runoff, because he does, I'm told, lack support amongst MPs who must decide who goes onto the final two?
I mean, the MPs, answering more broadly rather than specifically, will, as they decide who to vote for, make a number of decisions. They will want to think who can best command the House of Commons, who can best win them an election, who is most popular in the country at large, and who can win with the Tory party voters. And those will be considerations MPs bear in mind.
And they should, because if there's issues of jealousy with Boris Johnson, his success, he's blamed by many for the Brexit decision, even though those don't like Brexit. Is he too divisive, or is he the kind of person who will give clarity on the future if he became a PM?
Let's again move away from Boris specifically, but you raise the question of divisiveness. You always have with a leadership election somebody who has clear positions, you know where that person stands, and you know the direction that will be taken. Or you have essentially compromise candidates who haven't offended anybody very much, whose views aren't very well formed or very clear, who get there by default. And if you look at the two most recent people in that category, I would say they were Theresa May and John Major. And people will ask themselves, how successful was that?
A good point. How will history judge Theresa May, do you think, Jacob Rees-Mogg?
I think it will judge her as somebody fundamentally decent, hard-working and dutiful, who was in office in an exceptionally difficult time, who did the best that she possibly could against what turned out to be overwhelming circumstances.
And do you think that given she's now said she's going, you know how politics, power drains away imperceptibly, now she's said she's going, starting on May 22nd, 2030, if the deal is passed. If the deal is not passed, can she stay on beyond that date? Because I'm not sure she can anymore. I'm sorry to say that.
Okay, that's a very good point. Once you've said you're going, power does begin to drain away. It's why politicians try to avoid giving an end date, though Margaret Thatcher, when she said she was going to go on and on and on, had the reverse effect. So
David Cameron tried to stay on longer, and then it was curtailed, wasn't it? I mean, you know how it happens.
It's a very difficult question for politicians to answer.
But she's now said it.
But she's now said it. But she said it clearly as a conditional. I think when you say power draining away, I'm tempted to ask what power, because with a hung parliament, the Prime Minister has very little power. When we look at the powerful, authoritative Prime Ministers, and go back over any period in history, the ones who were powerful and authoritative always had big majorities. The ones who had small majorities, however brilliant they were as characters, as individuals, how capable they were as politicians, never had the same amount of power as a Blair, as a Thatcher, as a Churchill during the war, and so on.
But just to be clear, the question was, should she stay on beyond May the 22nd, 23rd, if the deal isn't going to go through?
Look, my position on the leadership regarding Mrs May is that I was involved in the vote of no confidence against her last year, and she has my support as Prime Minister. I didn't change my mind on the deal conditional on her saying she would go. I changed it because of facing the prospect of no Brexit at all. So I'm going to leave that matter for other people.
And finally, what's more likely this year, a second referendum or an election?
Oh, that is a real Hobson's choice. I don't know which is more likely this year. I think both are relatively unlikely. I think you saw yesterday a second referendum was defeated again, and that was
got the most votes of all the eight options.
But that was without the cabinet voting. A lot more people would have voted against it had the cabinet been voting.
Should that change on Monday? Should the PM change the whipping on Monday and let cabinet vote against these options? Or in favour?
Well, what's Monday going to do? Everything's been rejected. The idea was that Monday would focus on the things that were most popular.
There might be a runoff and
so we're going to have a runoff on the least unpopular things, are we? I mean, it is a ridiculous system.
This is an idea they have suggested, I'm afraid.
They do not know what they are doing with the Constitution. They have no idea of how to make this system work. They are fiddling around because they want to frustrate Brexit and stop 17.4 million people.
An election with a new leader the answer to the Tory party's problems right now?
I don't think it's an answer to anyone's problems, actually, that we're not ready for an election at this point, but people should stick to their manifesto pledges, reread what they said. Both in the Labour Party and the Conservative Party, both main parties promised to fulfil the result of the referendum.
Jacob Rees-Mogg, thank you for coming on to mark Chopper's Brexit podcast 100th birthday, and do come on again.
Thank you very much. There isn't any cake.
Sorry.
I wanted to both have it and eat it.
Thank you.